folks, and welcome to Kelly's Chronicles, my channel where I sit down with people who are living everyday lives and listen to their extraordinary stories hidden behind normal, quiet existences. Because here we believe that those lives are the most important and need to be acknowledged, heard, and celebrated as to not be forgotten by the passage of time. Welcome, everybody. Hope you all had a wonderful week. Pretty good week over here. We had 2 inches of snow yesterday. I think it's probably about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. We had a windstorm, then we had rain, then we had hail, tornadoes, and then snow. It was some wild weather over here. Another thing is that we are finally going to be signing a lease on our tavern and restaurant that we're going to be opening up in Gunnersville, Alabama. We're very excited about that. Ready to go. We've been working on this for about 4 months now. That is what is going on with us this week. How was your week, Dad? How's everything going over your way?
Well, the weather has not been really a factor here, except we have had some real serious wind, but no precipitation, except for just a scattered sprinkling. And it's gotten so bad, the dust is blowing across the interstate, and they closed I-15 by Blackfoot because of the dust blowing across. We're in the middle of a real drought here in eastern Idaho, which is unfortunate since we got a lot of farmers here and a lot of ranchers that need to have that moisture. So we'll see. Maybe Heavenly Father will smile on us and we'll have something here in the near future to have a nice spring for the winter wheat and the potatoes to be moisture, have moisture to sustain them. So
Sure.
yeah.
Oh.
Anyway, yeah, no, we've had a lot of medical things going on with your mom and Joyce, and but we've worked through it, and I think everything is going to be a little quieter this week. It's been a very eventful Monday. Monday was weird, so got through that, and now I think it'll be kind of quiet the rest of the week, except for tomorrow, or is it today? Yeah, today is
Oh, it
St.
is?
Patty's Day.
Oh,
Lauren Bulgari. Hi.
didn't you once tell me that one of the things that was on your bucket list was to go kiss the Blarney Stone?
Right. Someday I will go to Ireland and I will kiss the Blarneys. I know it's a tourist attraction and it's nasty. You got to lay on your back and kiss this nasty lichen covered rock on the top of a castle. But I would like to have the gift of Blarney, the gift of Gab. Yeah. So you Swedes just don't have that for the most part. We're not blessed. We're kind of quiet. The normal Swede is just kind of a introverted, quiet person. The Irish are joyous. They have beautiful music and they love to dance and sing. And of course, they're a bunch of drunks. That's okay. I'll forgive that. I'll forgive that in them. They're sweet people. I would just that's one of on my bucket list to go to kiss Blarney Stone, and even if it has no effect on me psychologically or in communication factor, it'll still be something I want to do.
Hey, I want to go eat pasta and drink wine down in Italy. We all have our bucket list items. I definitely don't want to go snow in Australia. I'm okay there. I'm good. But I'm definitely with you there, going and seeing the beautiful green landscape of Ireland and the cliffs and kissing the Blarney Stone. It's a good bucket list item. Sounds like you're doing okay over there and over in good old Idaho. I thought you guys would get some snow or at least some rain then before the summer season came, but maybe you guys will have I hate to say it, but maybe you guys will have an early winter with a lot of snow coming up this year. So,
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're way down on our snow here. We should have feet of snow piled up on top of the mountains, and we have the very top of the mountains has got a good layer because of the wind, but the lower elevations, which should have feet of snow on it,
yeah,
not there. I'm not so concerned about it. I mean, we have a river running through our backyard, and it's maintained by a spring-fed lake up in the mountains, and it's not going to go dry. So we'll always have water. But for
sorry
the
about that.
farmer that's out doesn't have a river in his backyard, yeah, they're gonna suffer if we don't have some moisture here. And they always pray for moisture, moisture. They don't pray for snow or rain. It's moisture.
Ain't no damn break in the river out of so I know they rely heavily on the snow in Idaho more than what I think people even know. Idaho is a lot of farmland, lots of potatoes and lots of wheat and a lot of cattle. And they rely very heavily on
Yep.
the water. Living out west can be a little bit difficult, but harder than what people say. You find yourselves a little oasis in the Idaho mountains, so and that has a good supply of water. You got lucky. Well, let's jump right into our podcast. Dad, you and I discussed today that we need to move on from your school career, and I sat down with it last night and thought about it. I think it's time to move into your next part of life, jump out of school in your younger years and start moving into your next part of life, your military career. We've been talking for a while now about, we've been doing this podcast for almost a year now, actually. Did you know that? It's almost a year. We've done 25 videos and we'll be at a year in, I believe it's June, because we were in California when we first did our podcast last summer. Remember that? Yeah. Isn't it crazy?
Wow.
Time
Wow.
flies when you're having fun, telling stories about life.
Hey,
I didn't know
really?
that I didn't
Yeah.
realize that when we first started doing this, how much of a journey it would take us on. But we've had so much fun talking about family and the different stories about your life. It's been really great. So when we do hit our 1 year mark, it'll be a little bit of a celebration. We'll definitely cheers to it. Let's just see where you're at in life. Pick up with you in Arkansas,
Okay.
where you and your parents were at the time that your high school graduation rolled around.
Okay. Well, to begin with, my dad was retired military, and when he retired, he was making about $300 a month. This is back in the early '60s, and he had accrued enough time in the military to get a 50% pension, which was 50% of his base pay for his pension. So he was making $150 a month for a pension.
All right.
And fortunately, my mother had worked a lot while he was in the military, like when he was in Turkey, and even when we were down in Georgia, she was working in the base nursery, and she was making a little bit of money. And then I guess dad was uh, very frugal, and they saved $11,000
Good.
before he retired. So they had money back then. That was a lot of money, and he had money to buy with cash several pieces of property and fix them up. So by the time I graduated, we were living in a little wooden house, two bedroom, one bath on a little lot in the outskirts of Springdale, place called Oak Grove. They were doing okay. Dad, all of his he had some health issues. He had a permanent disability and was getting disability in addition to the $150. He was getting a little medical help so he could go to the VA and have have his medical condition taken care of, and also getting a little bit of money from the government to help with
Okay.
his disability. 'Cause that's why he was given a medical discharge from the Air Force for
Right.
having a heart murmur. So the VA kicked in, and at first he was on Air Force pension, and he was getting, like, a little bit of money, and a friend of his said, "You need to switch to the VA and you'll get more money." So he switched to the VA sometime in the '60s and get larger
That's
pension because of it. Anyway, my folks had, like, basically $0 to put me
yeah.
through college. So I was thinking about going to college, and I was seriously looking at, like, University of Arkansas or whatever, and my folks moved. When they moved to an area that had a college. They went to Poplar Bluff, Missouri, which had Southeastern Missouri State, and then they moved to Northwest Arkansas, which had
Right.
University of Arkansas, and also had in southern Missouri, they had Missouri Southern College, and it was only about 50 miles away. And so I was going to be Joe College and do all this. The draft was looking, I mean, this was in right when Vietnam was kicking up big time in the early 60s. They had landed Marines in Da Nang, and the Air Force was over there doing bombing raids, and it looked like it was going to really pick up. And Kennedy was assassinated in '63, and Lyndon Johnson took over as president. He was a hawk. He
Yeah.
wanted war, and he wanted America to be involved in it. And so the draft was initiated, and they drafted practically the whole class
Well,
of '64, all the guys. And so that's what I was looking at. And I said, well, I would rather choose what I'm going to do rather than being drafted and
okay.
told what to do. So at 17, I got my parents to sign the papers, and December 10th of 1964, at age of 17, I went in the Army National Guard. And the Army National Guard had a unit in Springdale, the 142nd Field Artillery Unit there in the Armory
Okay.
in Springdale. And so for my senior trip in June of 1965, I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for Army basic training. About 2.5 months later, I came back home on leave, and because I was on active duty for like 11 months as I went through training. And then I went to Army Artillery School in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And after I went through a lot of military experience and everything, I found I had a
Okay.
epiphany, and I said, I love I love the artillery. I wish I would have stayed in the Army and been an artillery officer. It was amazing. I mean, Army basic training is the same for everybody. You go through, and of course, Vietnam was starting to kick up pretty good, so they trained us to fight in like small unit tactics, and a slight. We had a little bit of like what it was like to be in the jungle, and of course, we were in the jungles of
Okay.
Louisiana, and it was pretty miserable because I remember one time we had a 17-mile hike to the rifle range, and we got to the rifle range. It had been raining the day before, and the rifle positions where you would set up, and then they would have these they call pop-up targets. They were like a little electric motor would pop up these silhouettes. That's what you shot at. And if you hit it, it'd fall down. Anyway, I got there and had this culvert about 3 foot in diameter sunk in the ground, and it was
Okay.
full of water. And I was where I had to shoot from. And I looked down in there, there was a snake swimming around in there. and and it was was Army training guy, this Army sergeant training guy standing there, and I said, "Sarge, there's snake in there," and he looks down and he says, "It ain't poison. Get in the hole." And so I went down, jumped down in there, and the snake was swimming around me. You know, I said, "Oh!" And that was where I had to qualify. Well, you had to qualify. You didn't have to be an expert, but you had to qualify. So you had to hit X number of targets. And so I wore glasses. I wore glasses from
Yeah.
the time I was 12, and I got up. I had this M14. The first round I fired, the bolt went back and sprayed my face with oily
Oh,
water. So the glasses became useless. So I took the glasses off and commenced trying to hit these pop-up targets. And I did. I hit enough to qualify. I qualified. And that was the end of that. Now, this is the Army basic training, and they had other things that were live fire. They had this one thing where you and one other guy would advance on an imaginary position, like a bunker or something, and we would shoot past the guy in front of you to cover him as he advanced. And I'm going, I sure hope that guy knows how to shoot because I'm gonna be in front of him.
yeah.
And yeah, anyway, then we threw grenades. Usually you go to grenades and you throw maybe one or
Yeah.
two. We threw, I bet, 50 grenades because they're getting us
Yeah.
ready for Vietnam. They
They
wanted us
did.
to know how to, and we went to grenades a lot. And yeah, it was interesting. There was a lot of guys that couldn't throw or they get nervous and drop the grenade. The grenade thing was interesting. And then we had lots of small unit tactics where we would, and we had booby trap training where they would had a mock village set up, a Vietnam village set up, and they'd have all these things laying around in the ground or up in the windowsills and stuff, and tell you don't touch that because that's probably a booby trap, probably blow up, and we went through all that, and then so I graduated from
Yeah.
basic training and went on Fort Sill and we were right next to in Fort Sill. We were right across the street from the gun park where they had hundreds of 105 howitzers, 105 millimeter howitzers parked, and I was so eaten up with artillery, and we had a test where we had to break down a 105 artillery piece and put it back together again, not individually,
Mhm.
but as a unit. But I wanted to be perfect, and I would sneak out at night and take guns apart, take the howitzers apart, and put it back together again. I did that 2 or 3 nights and got very proficient at 105 howitzers. Now, like I said, looking back on it, it was an amazing experience to be there and firing these because you could actually see this is the most amazing thing as well. It's like shooting a big rifle. You would actually when you pull the lanyard and fired that cannon, you could see the round going down range and hitting a target. You could actually
Wow.
watch it. And where we were at in Fort Sill was a huge it's just for artillery training. And they had 105s in the front, the little guys. Then right behind us, they had 155s, which were
Mhm.
slightly bigger. Then behind them was 175s, which were significantly bigger than the 105s. And then behind them were the 8-inch guns, and they were a lot bigger than the 105s. And they would fire over our heads. We would be there and we would be shooting our little bitty 105s, and then these big boys would be shooting over our heads. And our impact area was where you could see it. It was right there, probably a mile away. And these guys were firing 10 miles away. And they actually shot, there was a road that ran through Fort Sill, and they were firing over the road and impacting on the other side of this highway. And I said, "Ooh, I hope they don't have a short round." Yeah, anyway, it was fast watching these 8-inch
That's
shells. You could see them
crazy.
going over your head. You see them going, and the one even the 175s, you could see them because they were behind us, so the rounds were up, they were up hundreds of feet in the air, but you could still see them things going down and then way off in the distance, boom, where it impacted and exploded. It was amazing. I was fascinated by it. And one of the things that I really one of the things that when the 105s or all artillery, they have a two-piece shell. Now the big guns, they have a powder bag and then a projectile, but the smaller guns, the 175, 155, 105, they have a, uh, a brass, uh, base, and then they have a projectile that fits on top of it. And inside that brass case are bags of powder, a cordite,
Okay.
and when you fired, you would get a firing order our control center, and the fire control center would tell us what we're shooting at and how many increments to use, and it was 7 powder bags. So they'd say 4 increments or 3 increments, and you would put the bags in the base, in the hollow base, and then you would cut off you would put the if you know, like, there's 7 bags, so if it's at 5, you'd put 2 bags outside and 5 bags inside. Then when you put the shell into the casing, it would cut the string, and the bags would
Okay.
fall on the ground. And so at the end of the day, at the end of the firing mission, we would have hundreds, because it was a whole battery. It was like 5 or 6 guns that were all firing, and we'd have hundreds of these bags of cordite and that, for the increments. And so we'd lay them on the ground in a big long, uh, uh,
Line.
like a row, just like in a field of corn or something. You have a row of powder bags, and we would set them off. We would use a road flare and set them off, and these things would burn. I mean, white hot all the way down that row of powder bags, and he's had that smell of quarter, and I was just fascinated by it, and I just loved that was one of my favorite things. We're gonna burn that quarter. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I was eaten up with it. Anyway, it was a really eye-opening experience for
I
me
bet.
because I never had considered what artillery was all about. Yeah, no, I kinda knew what infantry was. I mean, because we used to play cowboys and
Yeah.
Indians all the time, as a kid, so we kinda knew, you run around with a rifle and go bang, bang. But that big gun, the artillery piece, whoa, that was an eye opener and a revelation for me, and we had at the when we first got there, they would have a demonstration. They would have a single gun. It was a graduating class, artillery school graduating class, and they would have a demonstration. They would, fire these artillery shells and show you what they could do and what they couldn't do, and everybody was ooh on. Well, at the end of the school, my gun and my battery was chosen to do the
Oh,
demonstration. So we demonstrated for the incoming class how cool this
yeah.
artillery was, and that just baked it into my brain. And I just love that, being able to have that much. I guess it's a power. I guess that's what it was a power trip, being able to go. They had a truck set up down on the impact area, and we blew that thing up. It was just incredible experience, and Fort Sill was amazing place. It was built in the Wichita Mountains down south of
Oh,
Oklahoma City, and they had a state park there, and they had actual mountains in Oklahoma. I mean, they weren't like the Rocky
wow.
Mountains, but they were several hundred feet high. They had picnic areas up on the top, and had a couple of lakes there. And I'm going, "Whoa, this is a nice place." I didn't even know this. I thought Oklahoma was just a bunch of you know, hills
So
and, you know,
very
prairie, but this was the Wichita Mountains were pretty off, and, I coulda stayed in Fort Sill, but
lasted that long.
yeah, I had to go back
Yeah.
to Arkansas,
So
and, I got back to Arkansas, and, I was an official trained member of this 142nd Field Artillery
right,
unit. So, and we went on a couple of drills. We would go down to what was it, the fort down by Little Rock. Can't remember the Fort Pike or something like that. And we go down there and have drills on some weekends. In the summer, you always went down in the summer. I went down there at least twice down to this fort. But the weekend drills, which you have once a month, you go in on a Saturday and Sunday, and you would drill. It was called drill, but actually it was a party. All these Arkansas National Guardsmen loved their beer, and they would all bring in cold beers, and everybody was drinking a Schlitz tall boys, and they were hiding them up behind the chalkboards and down in behind the trash can, everything, and they'd stop they'd have a little class going on. They hold just a second, take a big old sip, and go on.
wow.
What? And there's one drill, and this old Chevy pickup pulls into the front of the. I mean, it pulled right up on the grass in front of the armory. There was a tree there, and they and this all these this woman and a bunch of kids get out, and the dog gets out, and they're out there having a picnic in front of the armory, and her husband's inside getting drunk. And I said, I'm going to do this for 6 years. I'm going to come down here with these
Oh,
hillbillies,
no!
and I wasn't drink. I was only 18. I couldn't drink. I mean, I could have, but I probably, and now there was all the old guys. They were all drinking, and I said, I am not doing this for
No
6
way.
freaking years. So I went. So me and Al
Oh,
Brooks.
good
Al
on
Brooks was he was a friend
you.
of mine from high school. We sat around one night, and we were drinking beers because I could go get beer if I wanted it, and I went and I got some beer, and we drank in a six pack. We were playing checkers, and so we had a bunch of checkers there, and he said, "Let's figure out what we want to do. Let's what are we going to do for the rest of our lives, or at least for the foreseeable future." And I said, "What do you want?" Al was of course on the draft roll and everything, and he was looking down the road at maybe getting drafted. So I said, "Well, let's join and get the heck out of here, and let's figure it out." So we went and we said, "Marines, no.
Yeah,
Uh, Army, maybe, probably not, because that's
yeah,
Vietnam. Air Force, had grown up in the Air Force, no." And the Navy, yeah, Navy, and it was the three hots and a cot,
yeah,
the old 3 hots and a cot's the Navy, and Army, you're sleeping in a foxhole, and the same with the Marines. So we said, "Well, hey, on board a ship, that won't be bad. We won't get shot at or nothing. Let's just let's see what that's
that
got." So we did all the pros and cons on
yeah,
the going in the Navy, and it won out. Navy was it.
that was the decision.
And so we went down and with a Navy recruiter, and, well, first I went to the Army recruiter because, like I said, I
Mhm.
liked the artillery. So I went to the Army recruiter and I said, "Hey, I want to go which is RA, which is regular Army, because I was NG." And they had like four. They had RA, which is regular Army. They had NG, which is National Guard. They had reserves, and then they had one other
Yeah,
thing. They had different aspects. So you could, if you were the National Guard, you could go on active duty without any problem. You're already trained, everything, and they just take you right in. So I called our recruiter. He said, "Okay, I'll get back with you a couple of days and tell you what we got
right.
going for you." So I was going to go in regular army. So about 2, 3 days later, the recruiter calls back, Army recruiter, and he says, "Okay, this is what I got for you. If you go in the army, regular army, you will either go to Fusen, Germany, which is in the Alps of southern Germany, in November, which meant I would have been out in the snow and the cold and everything, digging in artillery." And I said, "Nah, I don't know about that." He said, "Oh, well, we'll send you to Vietnam."
What?
I
That's
said, "Well,
decisions.
man, I don't think so." So
Navy, you went.
anyway, I went to so we subsequently went to the Navy recruiter. He said, "Okay, yeah, you're fully qualified," and they sent us, even though I was prior I'd already been through everything in the Army, they sent us down to Little Rock to go through a regular enlistment thing. So you had to have a physical and take uh, um, the entrance test and everything. So we went down there and we got down. Me and Al were going to go on a buddy program. This Navy recruiter had said, "Yeah, you're going to go on the buddy program." So I went down there and they found out Al had a warrant out for his arrest, so Al was instantly disqualified, and I went in all in the Navy. And it was the side thing, since I was prior service, I was because I've been through the Army, had just came from, like, a couple of months before, I went through Army basic training and artillery school, so he said, "Well, you'll be in a prior service company in the Navy, and we'll have you home by Christmas." And this was, like, the end of November. And I said, "Oh, a month in basic? I can do that standing on my head, that's awesome." 13 freaking weeks later, 13 weeks I spent Christmas, New Year's, and my birthday in Navy boot camp. I coulda killed that chief, man. I mean, what a lying dirtbag. I mean, he knew what was gonna happen. He said, "You're not gonna sucker here."
Here's a
A realist boy, you know? Yeah, it was
well,
hilarious. Yeah, looking back on it, man, yeah. The only uh, thing that's good is that
prop.
she's probably dead, and he's probably down there with Satan.
I'm like, oh, I got them all.
He's in he's in the lower part of hell somewhere for being a lying piece of garbage. What a career. What did you do in the Navy, daddy? Oh, I lied to young men.
That's
I lied to hundreds of young men. Oh, yeah, it was just in that. Anyway, yeah, there was a lot of things that went on in the Army that I haven't really, kind of glossed over it, and we maybe go through that later on, some like KP and guard duty and all that stuff that I had to do in the Army basic, and then artillery school was, a
yep.
little different. Yeah, it wasn't so, uh intense. There was more relaxed, and they didn't have us out running around at 5 o'clock in the morning and
Yeah.
doing push-ups and all that. So yeah, it was a little bit more relaxed and more of a school than it was
Yeah.
training. Military training. Anyway, that
I do have three quick questions. We'll wrap up everything. So, um, one question that I had was, were you still in high school? Had you graduated from high school when you went into the National Guard?
no, I was still I was still 6 months from graduation. It was in December of 64, and I didn't graduate till May of
So how
65.
did you just take a break from school and tell them that you had to go to training, or was it like on your break?
No, I
Oh,
just stayed in high school, and we do a weekend drill, once a month, and then once from December until June, I was going down, and I was going through their drills, and I went to summer camp and all that kind of stuff, and then I went on to basic training in June in Fort Polk and then
okay.
artillery school, and they were not happy when I told them I was going in the Navy. They were pissed. 'cause they didn't
Oh,
train me.
well, that's how
Oh,
life
well.
goes. So I just wanted to set up the timeline for us moving into the next part of your life. The second question that I have, if you had told me that you had approached your parents and told them that you wanted to join the military, that was a big decision that you had made. That was one of the largest decisions
Yeah.
of your youth, was deciding to do this really big adult choice. So Grandpa Olson, he had to sign for you to join the military. He had to do the signing. How did the conversation go when you told your parents you wanted to join the military? Were they worried? Was your mom concerned? How did that go?
Uh, well, I to the best of my recollection, Dad he was satisfied with me. He thought that was a good decision, that, yeah, I could go to college and I could get some, help from the Army, help me out going through
Yeah.
college,
Okay.
and, since I was in the National Guard, I wasn't ever gonna go to Vietnam. That made my mom feel pretty good that I wasn't gonna go over and be cannon
Yeah.
fodder in Vietnam, and, so I felt like it was, the right thing to do, and they agreed, and they signed the
Okay.
papers, and the reason why that took place while I was that young is the artillery unit, the National Guard unit, didn't have any openings right away. Everybody was
Oh,
joining National Guard to get out of the draft. Well, Dad pulled some strings. He went and to talk to some of his buddies in Little Rock, and they opened up a slot for me, and that I could participate in the National Guard while I was still in high school, and even though I had not been through basic training, and I didn't know anything about wearing uniforms or saluting. That was stuff I would have covered in basic training, but I didn't go to basic training for months and months. Just kind of adopted me and, let me hang around the armory and, be the mascot or something. I don't know. That was unusual to have a high school kid in the National Guard. Normally, you join the National Guard, you go right to basic training, artillery school. I had 6 months there where I was just hanging
chilling.
around, and they issued me this uniform. It didn't fit, and I kind of it was hilarious, and I was watching all these trumps, and all this weird stuff going on, and I think by the time I came back after I graduated from artillery school, I graduated I think in October. I came back, and it was right back into the same, drinking and families
Oh,
hanging around. No, I said, I'm not doing
yeah.
this for 6 years. I'm done. But I loved the Army. I did. I really did. And I loved artillery. And I think, in retrospect, I should have stayed in the Army and artillery and done what I really, really love
Yeah.
to do.
Yep. Um, so the last question that I wanted to ask, and then we'll finish up for the day. What lesson did you learn in your youth that has stayed with you through your life?
Wow. Big question. I think you have to work for what you want. If you want to have money, you got to work. If you want to have a career, you got to work. You got to have training. You got to go to college or whatever to get trained to do what you want to do. So there are steps
Yeah.
to life, and you can't step in. A lot of people think you step in, they'll be the executive vice president the first week. It's not that way at all. You got to earn. You have to earn every.
Yeah.
So life is earned, and the other one is there's no free lunch.
Hey, there is no free
Yeah,
lunch. It's got to be paid for somewhere or the other. So that's those are good life lessons.
yeah.
Work hard for what you want to work your way up, and there's no free lunch. You got to pay for it one way or the other. It's paid for, brother.
Yeah, blood, sweat, and tears, I
That's
guess,
right.
whatever.
That's right. So those are good life lessons that you learned in your youth, and that's a good wrap up to your childhood and your teenage years and moving into your military career. So, and I'm excited.
Yeah. Really. Now the fun begins. Navy was a trip, man.
Yeah,
3 years of
weird thing.
weird stuff.
We're just
Yeah.
to this.
Yeah. Vietnam. Wow.
This is and
Anyway.
this. I said we've been looking forward to this in a healthy way. It's always kind of a difficult
Yeah.
subject, especially with having to dig up things that did cause post-traumatic stress syndrome eventually, but it's also a really good space where we can talk about it and you can find different things in your mind that you can remember that will help you heal. So we're excited to be in those aspects
Yeah.
and just excited for the really interesting stories that you'll remember. So, but let's go ahead and wrap it up. We want to thank all of you folks for joining us today. We appreciate all the love and support that all of you bring us here. And please like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends and your family. And as always, please be safe out there on the roadways, especially on the roadways. And we will catch you next week.